It's always gratifying when there's somebody waiting eagerly for me before I even go live. Good morning to you, Ralph. Now, as you know from the title, Rob Dufour of Islam4Europeans will be on the Jolly Heretic tomorrow. And you can check him out on his channel. He has actually spoken to Ed Dutton before, and you can obviously check him out on his own channel, complaining about Daniel Huckicupto. I don't really know what it was all about. It was as if he was saying, Daniel shouldn't have been talking to Mark Collett, the white nationalist, because nationalists might get it into their heads that they might be using Islam for their nefarious white nationalist purposes, and I wouldn't want Islam to be tarred by that brush. I'll admit that I was listening to Rob Dufour at double speed, and frankly, I can't be bothered to listen to it again to see if I correctly assessed him. But you will be able to tell from the way he talks that he is very keen to hedge his words so he can't be held too much accountable for anything truthful or inevitable that might be deduced from the meaning of his words. Why does he do that? It is because he wants the benefit of plausible deniability. We know that Rob Dufour has been on my channel a few times. We also know that when one of my streams was porn bombed, that he held his elbow up to his eyes in order to avoid seeing that, so that his immortal soul might not be endangered by this glimpse of fornication. So this is the sort of man here, so he can't be expected to be talking boldly about secular Quranism when given the opportunity. He will be talking about everything else but secular Quranism. But the beauty of secular Quranism is that it actually gives people like Rob Dufour what they really, really want. Because what Rob is always complaining about is that he and others like him, i.e. white converts to Islam in the West, is that they have to be minorities within a minority, because the white majority in Canada would reject white people who convert to Islam because of their Islamophobia, and therefore in order to be Muslim, they would have to hang around in Asian mosques, and that culture would be alien to people like Rob Dufour, who obviously want to find their own white space in this brown culture of Islam in Canada. So he wants something else, and he wants a safe space for white converts. But obviously, if secular Quranism were adopted by the Canadian government, then people like him would be mainstream. But sadly, Rob Dufour is too frightened to actually ask for what he really, really wants. And so it is the case that while it may be possible for the white man to convert to Islam, his natural timorousness will not be extractable even by a thin coating of Islam. And this is basically the problem of the post-Christian Westerner who has no principles and apparently no ability to understand the purpose of having principles. Today it has been suggested to me that I, of all people, should super chat Ed Dutton after all the sacrifices I've made in terms of, well, lost income and lost opportunities as a result of sticking to my principles. So should I be super chatting Ed Dutton in order to make him read out my name in order to get the acknowledgement that I rightly ought to receive as the conceiver of secular Quranism? Well, I think that those who would like Ed Dutton to discuss secular Quranism for their own purposes of education and enlightenment ought to be doing so on my behalf. Bearing in mind that Ed Dutton has been hostile to me from the beginning and never, ever once acknowledged my existence by responding to my emails. We know the reason why he is doing this, because he senses that secular Quranism might be controversial, and he doesn't want to be mired in controversy because he knows how nasty white nationalists can be about Islam, and he doesn't want to lose any subscribers or make the sacrifices of having fewer super chats, because secular Quranism is triggering for the majority of post-Christian Westerners who, on the one hand, not Christian, on the other hand, don't want Christianity to be identified as being kaput and unfit for the purpose of maintaining morality, because they hate Islam for irrational reasons. So nobody can really deny that this is the true motivation for Ed Dutton, even though he likes to pretend that I said things that he was offended by. And the truth of the matter is that he doesn't think he will acquit himself well, because he has been, on the one hand, trying to avoid being accused of hate speech as regards Muslims and Islam. On the other hand, he wants to be known as somebody who thinks Islam is stupid, and he has said that as much on one of his streams. So he is basically treading a thin line, and he really doesn't want to give me the credit of being the one who conceived of secular Quranism and has consistently been promoting it for years. But you can all go and super chat Ed Dutton to see what he does. He might do the dishonourable thing of taking your super chat while refusing to mention my name or secular Quranism directly. So, House of Commons, who is no other than Ralph Masilamani, says nationalism is kaput. Why does he say that when most of his subscribers and viewers are, in fact, people you would normally identify as nationalists? Cowardice, I suppose. Trying to tread the thin line of being, on the one hand, socially acceptable, yet pandering to people who unashamedly identify as nationalists. That would be Thomas Barton Rees and also Arvol that I spoke to a few days ago. We know their political preoccupations and their timorousness in refusing to acknowledge as much. So you have these people who want something but are afraid to make a case for it. They are afraid to make arguments for it, to defend the principle of nationalism. Not I, since I seek to define nationalism as government in the national interest. Now, there are no nationalists, or no prominent nationalists who will engage with me. Certainly, Nick Griffin is not able to engage with me on these matters, presumably because he doesn't think I have the locus standi. I don't know. I have not engaged with him on this subject, but others that I have spoken to who were members of the British National Party are in fact incapable of engaging in a discussion on the definition of nationalism in an honest and rational way. So plagued as I am with this moral and intellectual dishonesty, it is difficult to get anywhere because of the broken structures of national debate. Trying to get anyone to engage with you is really like herding cats, and even when you do get somebody to talk to you, they are people with some fake name and therefore they have no moral or intellectual authority, and they sound, well, probably autistic, sub-beta, and really what they want to do is say, either consciously or unconsciously, that they're only mentally ill, low status males, and yeah, they don't want any trouble, and they're not going to be a threat to the political establishment, and it's that sort of thing. Even Ralph Masilamani does that because he pretends that what he does is going to be mainstream, and he wants to sell it to the political establishment, i.e. the Conservative Party, and that's basically his shtick. So if any of you want to super chat Ed Dutton for your own purposes of education and information, then this is what you should do. And if you're not already subscribed or notified of when it's going to be live, then this is what you should do to get Ed Dutton to. You have to bribe him, basically. You have to bribe him in order to get him to acknowledge my existence and my contribution to British nationalism. Because we know how these nationalists think. They think that because I wasn't born in this country, because I'm not part of their network, that I don't belong. But they themselves have no new ideas. They are intellectual mediocrities and seek not to engage with me in order to what? To hold on to their position of what? You see, these men have no ideas, no proposals. They only hope to carry on complaining about Muslims, blaming Jews, and what? If you listen to what they say in their Telegram groups, what they're really hoping for is some sort of revolution as a result of protesting against lockdown. But they have no leader, they have no intellectual heft. They are all intellectual mediocrities. They cannot express themselves clearly if they even had the courage to say what they want. The best they can manage who seem to have any kind of idea, even though it's snake oil basically, is Ralph and he ain't white. But I suppose he attracts these low education, low information types because he sounds like he could be prime ministerial because of his posh public school accent. And that's it. Because if they close their eyes, they'll think, oh, it could be a white public schoolboy talking to them. And that is what they hold on to as they larp as people with a future, riding on the coattails of failed Christian nationalism. So who is another person that aspires to be intellectual? That would be Daniel Sienkiewicz. It should be noted that Ralph never uses his real name, or keeps, if he ever uses any part of his name, he will change it. That's why he's called House of Comments now, and before that he was called Right Reaction, because he doesn't want to be actually identified as Ralph Masilamani, so he can have the benefit of plausible deniability. Now, the only other person that I can think of with an idea would be Daniel Sienkiewicz, who uses his real name and has a website, but his idea is fundamentally incoherent. He thinks he can create a religion without explicitly creating a religion, and I have noticed that Arvol has echoes of his ideas, but then Arvol doesn't use his real name. And his ideas are completely incoherent. So basically, he was involved in nationalism, but doesn't think nationalism is good optics, so he's given that up. So now he's become a globalist, and he thinks somehow this thing that Daniel Sienkiewicz wants, which is a unionization, which is basically the concept of white people just naturally, without being told, acting in their interests, without a religion, without anybody saying anything, without a leader. Talk about wishful thinking, and believing in fairy tales. So I'm putting it to you that you won't get anywhere if you don't have a big idea and you have no leader. And if you're too scared to even discuss this, well, nothing's going to happen. And because you are basically morally degenerate and incapable of joined up thinking, nothing will happen. So in the end, it will be people who have a moral system, an established moral system with a long-standing tradition, i.e. Judaism and Islam, who will ever get anywhere. And so you see the indispensable ingredient of having a functioning moral system, at least effective at maintaining minimum standards of sexual morality, which is to ensure that most parents in your society are married parents. Or that, or at the very least, most people, most members of your society are not illegitimate. Because that would be, well, a sexual offence according to chapter 24, verse 2 of the Quran, which is a mortal sin if you go by the, well, lists of mortal sins that Catholicism has. I will now read the chat in the hope of finding a coherent argument, but I'm not optimistic. I've tried being nice to white people. It doesn't work. Because if you're too nice, they'll just think you're just, well, to be ignored, right? I have to show them that I am serious about my ideas. And if they think my ideas are so stupid, then they can tell me so on their channel. But they're too afraid and too intellectually dishonest. No, not a single coherent argument. Right, so I will finish now and remind you again that Rob Dufour, somebody I consider to be an egregious milquetoast, has been invited to be on Ed Dutton, and I have been told by others that Ed Dutton only invites people that he can dominate. And of course, he wouldn't be able to dominate me, and that's why he won't be inviting me on his channel. But if you want to know why he won't be able to discuss honestly and rationally the merits of secular Quranism, then you could be super chatting him and to see which way he jumps. Because I won't be doing that on principle, because I have principles, unlike so many of you.